How's it going, everyone? David from dodmedia. Today we're going to be reviewing this absolute monstrosity of a camera rig. This is my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K multi-purpose rig. Now, I've not seen a rig that encapsulates what this can do yet, and I'm going to show you that in the video. So I'm going to arrogantly go ahead and call it the SWAN Rig. Now, if you've seen any of my product reviews, gear reviews before, the number one thing that I absolutely love with filmmaking gear and photography gear is modularity. Being able to modularly shape, reposition, and change the layout of a rig or piece of equipment, to me, is hugely important, because it allows every single user to fine-tune it how they would like to use it. And as you might expect, this is a highly modular rig. This rig can be used in a number of different formations, in a number of different shooting styles. And before I painfully break it down into every single individual part just to build it back up again on camera, I'm going to show you those different formations first. So the first setup, let's call it wings in, is just a purely traditional handheld shooting style, except that we've got this nice handle here. So instead of having to use the camera grip, you've got your hand a little bit further back, which just helps with balancing it and giving your arms a little bit more distance. So you've got one hand on this handle and the other one is supporting underneath the camera rig here and just tweaking that lens for manual focus shifts. Alternatively, if you're using a follow focus, well, that's where you can screw this arm around, and now you've got your follow focus wheel as well as your handle here. Now, this is almost like a rifle layout, so it's very comfortable to shoot for an extended period of time, as opposed to having both of your hands right up there under the camera. You can really shoot with this very comfortably for a long time, and if it's in your lens's view, you just lower that down until it's not in your lens's view. Nice. Now, the second layout I like to call wings up. And this one, I'm going to put this follow focus wheel back where it was at the back there. And then I'm going to loosen this rosette arm and rotate this all the way around until it's sitting on top of the camera. And in fact, let me just bring it down so I can turn that handle like so. And then I'm just going to loosen this little thing, which allows me to extend that rosette arm. So then I can lock that down. And now I've got a nice reverse grip from what the initial layout was, where my right arm is up above holding the camera as if I were using the top handle, but more comfortably because it's this nice shaped wooden handle. And the bottom arm is underneath supporting the rig while also tweaking the focus. Now, this is probably my favorite layout to use because having your hands supporting the camera at the back from underneath, I find that really just helps manage that weight for a longer period of time. And actually, if you were to put an Niceyrig on this, which is one of those over-the-head harnesses with a cable that comes down and locks onto your top handle, I think I could comfortably shoot like that all day long. It's just a really comfy layout for me to shoot in. But let's say your arms are getting tired. Well, then you've got the third formation, which is wings down. Now, wings down, we're just going to loosen this handle here, bring this all the way down, tighten that back up, and then we're going to extend these arms all the way out. Same thing on the other side. Then we'll just rotate this handle like so. And now you're all set for some shoulder recording. I've got my monitor right there and I can see absolutely everything I'm doing. I've got a nice comfy shoulder pad. I've got my handle here, my follow focus here. I'm set to go. Now, you may have noticed that there's a little additional VMount battery there. You may have been wondering, why is that? Let me just flatten these arms back down so that it'll sit quite happily on the table there. Well, there are a few reasons why I've got this additional VMount plate, as well as this one. I've got this one on a dummy battery, not connected to anything. The first one being to have a spare battery on you. Just because if for any reason you are in a situation where you are shooting run and gun and you haven't got your camera bag with you, which would have all your gear with you, and you don't have an easy way to carry an additional battery, there's one. Nice and simple. The other thing is that it adds a little bit more weight to the camera, which is what you want when you're shooting with a cinema rig. You don't want your camera to be really light and flimsy because you are not going to get very stable shots. You're going to be shaking around the place. Having that weight actually stabilizes you. But then the other reason that I've got it on there is that if I were to decide, you know what, I don't want to have all of this rod supported rig on here. I literally want to go for the most straightforward, bare bones layout. Well, then I can take off my top handle, unplug my HDMI cable. That way I remove my monitor and my top handle. Then with this little quick release that's in here, I can just release that and switch the D-tap power from the battery that's here onto the D-tap power outlet that is on this additional VMount battery. And now I have a very, very broken down minimalist layout for this camera while circumventing the only issue that I have with this camera, which is the really lousy battery life on the LPE6 internal batteries. So having this external V-lock, that allows me to get a big amount of juice for a much longer period of time. And having it going into that DC 12 volt, that means I can keep a battery in there, and when I'm not shooting, this battery will actually charge up that LPE6, make sure it's kept nice and charged so that if for any reason I run out of battery or I need to change it, I don't need to power the whole system down. I can just keep it running off that internal battery until I get a new fresh V-mount in there as well. And again, it's got the weight thing, so what I was talking about cinema cameras having weight, this extra weight will just help me keep the camera a little bit more stable. And I can tweak it nice and easily, manually, so it's a minimal setup. And while I have this camera off of here, as you can see, this is sort of equipped and ready to go for any camera because it's got a 501 quick release here. So any camera that I've got, like the Sony a7 III that is filming on right now, I could quite easily just smack that in there, adjust the follow focus to fit the lens that is currently on the camera, and I'm good to go. So now, so now I guess I'm just gonna have to break the whole thing down so that I can build it up again. All right, let's just put this here for now. All right, I'm just gonna go with it from here. I'm not gonna take apart the whole camera because it just seems unnecessary. Same with this plate here. I'm gonna tell you exactly which parts I'm using. If I don't use a model name, you'll find it in links in the description. I'll put them in the order that I talk about them in, so it makes it nice and easy for you if you were to decide to get any of these and you wanted to support my channel in doing so by using those affiliate links, which won't cost you anything extra, but I'll get a commission for the sale from the supplier, like Amazon or B&H. So the very first part is obviously the camera. Now I've got this camera cage, which is by Niceyrig. In fact, pretty much everything I'm using is by Niceyrig. There are other competitors like Tilta or Niceyrig or Easyrig or Camvate. They all make cages with their own twist on them. I just happen to have invested in Niceyrig for a long time. Every single camera I own has a Niceyrig cage on it because I trust them. I find their quality is fantastic, and price-wise, they're a little expensive, but they're not the most expensive. But ultimately it comes down to trust in the company on the quality that they deliver. They deliver quality. And I'm not being paid to say any of this by Niceyrig. Again, I like their products. So the very first thing I've added to the cage is actually this T5 clamp, because I am primarily shooting on these little Samsung T5 drives. I know a lot of people would balk at the idea of not using internal recording and only relying on something external in case something comes unplugged, but I'll get to that. But what I like about these little T5 drives is I can loosen that, pull this one out, swap it out for a fresh one. The cable doesn't move, clicks right into place, and I tighten it back down again. Now I did have to kind of and ah a little bit about where to place this. I tried it over here, but then it blocked a lot of the controls. I tried it over here, but then that got in the way of this V-lock battery system that I have, and I didn't want to compromise on the placement of this one because this is a much bulkier object to have to place somewhere else. So I decided to put it here where it would fit sideways underneath the top handle. Now, to get a little bit more room for my fingers under the top handle, I just added an additional NATO rail plate because I know there is one on the cage, but it gives me that extra ½ centimeter so that my fingers can actually fit underneath the cage, because without it, it was a little bit of a squeeze. Then, as I mentioned, the drive cables, well, I'm not worried about those coming loose because this one is clamped down there, so that's not coming out. And on this side, it has the cable clamp, which you can add to the cage. And this one has the USB-C port on the camera clamped down nice and tight. And then the cable itself runs in that little groove that is between the NATO rail and this. So I'm not worried about that cable being pulled on, coming loose, being damaged anyway. I think that's going to be fine. I've not had a problem so far. And then over here on this side, I've taken this dummy V-lock plate and I've secured it to the very edge of the cage. Now I've had to compromise on the NATO rail that's there, so I'm not going to be putting a handle there, but that's okay because I wasn't planning on putting a handle there anyway. Now I've got this dummy plate, which in itself weighs pretty much nothing. So I'm not even having to worry about removing that if I want to put this on a gimbal, for example, because I'm not going to have to add counterweights. Obviously, I probably wouldn't have the battery on there because it's really hanging off the side. But I don't have to worry about taking off this dummy plate if I'm using a gimbal because it weighs nothing. Okay, so that's the camera. Let's put her there. So then my rod support system, first of all, features this 501 release plate, quick release plate, which I love because you can clip it in and that way that is not moving until you release it with that button. That's a really nice addition to have because you're dealing with so much value in this equipment. You don't want it accidentally coming off and your camera falls off your rod support system. So that's a very nice addition. Then there are a number of these rod support plates which have a cheese plate on top and on the bottom. I just went for the most straightforward one that I could find that I knew would be big enough but not too high. And then I've also placed a 501 plate underneath it. This is really just an insurance in case I am shooting somewhere where I can't put the camera down, but otherwise I would typically put the camera down. But if I'm somewhere like in water or mud or somewhere where I just can't put it down on the ground, then I have this so that I can just slide it onto some legs if I need to. But as I say, it's an insurance. So then the rods that I'm using are these carbon rods. Let's just slide these in. What's nice about these is that they're long enough that I have a bit of versatility in how far or back the camera sits. So we'll tighten that down, probably around the middle, let's say. Then I've got my rosette arms, which are just gonna sit right on here. Now the way I'm angling them is so that they slope outwards when they're going down. That way the handles will extend outwards underneath and they'll actually come in towards the center of the camera when they're on top. I'm gonna slide this in just far enough so that this can still twist without being impeded by this central block, and likewise tightening the central block without being impeded by the rosette arms. So then these actual rosette arms that I have are kind of what allow me to have all of this modularity in this rig, because they're not just straightforward rosette arms. They feature a NATO rail which allows you to extend them, and you almost double their length, which is pretty awesome, and they are sturdy as hell. So having these for your handle, for your follow focus, is a really, really good idea if you want to have a little bit more modularity on your rig. So let's go ahead and attach these. Now at this point, it's looking a little bit like a transformer. So then I've got my handle, which is gonna go on the right-hand side because I'm right-handed, so I got a right-handed handle. Now this is an old handle that I had. I think it was from Niceyrig. What I've done is modified it and removed the attachment that was on there, and instead I've placed this rosette adapter that SWAN make on there so that I can have it mount directly to the rosette arm. And over on the other side is my follow focus. Now I'm using the very popular, very reviewed Nucleus Nano by Tilta. It's a fantastic follow focus if you want to do remote follow focus, or if you want to have it at the end of a handle like here, instead of having a manual, mechanical, traditional follow focus that is attached to the rails. And the benefit of using this is that it's wireless, which means that I can easily offhand it to a focus puller and they can focus pull remotely for me if the move that I'm doing is too complex and needs assistance with nailing that focus. So this is a very nice follow focus, and it feels great to use it as a handle as well. So again, I mounted this using the same rosette dummy adapter that I had on the other one, and that way I can mount the release plate that comes with the Nucleus Nano onto the rosette adapter, which then mounts onto the rosette arm. Okay, so then battery plate solutions. There are a number of battery plate solutions online. Many different options out there. I was lucky enough to be sent this by Rolux, who are the sister company of Yinchem, who make these batteries. Now I'll be doing a separate review of these Yinchem batteries, the Mini 99. They're 99 watt-hour batteries that output 14.4 volts, and they are fantastic because they have 2 DTAP ports and a USB port, as well as a little screen that shows you your current voltage and charge. So they agreed to send me the battery plate to use with it. And what I like about it is that it has all of the power options I'm going to want. So the USB to power the Nucleus Nano motor. It's got 7.2 volts if I'm ever having to power the Canon using a dummy adapter. It's got 1 DTAP out, which can power the camera directly, the Blackmagic. And then it has a 12 volt out so that I can power the monitor and not have to use a battery. And most important of all, it's got a kill switch. So I can easily turn that off and it will kill all connectivity to the battery, which means that the monitor isn't going to continue draining trickle charge from it. The camera's not going to drain anything from it either. Everything is going to turn off, so you'll preserve your most battery life. So let's go ahead and mount this here behind. Now this will obviously all have to change around a little bit, shift around a little bit when I put the camera on there, but for now we're just working this. And then finally, a shoulder mount. Now this is probably the piece of gear that I've owned the longest out of everything on this table. This is my original Jag 35 Field Runner shoulder rig that I got about 10 years ago. More even. It might even have been longer than that. This was when I was using the Canon 7D for filmmaking, and it's pretty much the only part of it that I still use. Now you can get far more comfortable shoulder mounts, but nothing's as good as what's free and available to you, so that's what I'm using. And I'll shove this right on the end just to get as much distance between the camera gear and the shoulder mount as I can. So with that getting tightened up nicely, that is pretty much it for the rig part. So now let's match the camera onto that plate, hit that quick release. I can just drop this in, I don't need to slide it, which is another perk of this thing. Clip that in. Now that's not going anywhere. So my battery plate can certainly slide forward a little bit to maybe there. Yeah, that's good. Let's go ahead and take this battery locker on. Beautiful. Then I've got a rod that is going to hold my monitor, as well as a 15mm rod clamp, which has a NATO rail attachment so that I can put it on the NATO rail attachment that is on the top handle. Seeing if my secondary camera there is picking it up, but it's too high. That's okay, we'll persevere. I've put this NATO rail on the front of the top handle so that I can have this move to different extensions instead of having to just get one really long rail, because then I can put that there and I can collapse this one in the middle if I don't want to have that fully extended out. Just gives a bit more flexibility that way. Then the monitor that I'm using is the Niceyrig 4K. It's the original Niceyrig 4K that they released, which is just the standard A6 monitor. It only has HDMI in though, so if I were to need a focus puller, well then I would get something that has HDMI out, which I can loop out to a transmitter, and that way they can have a monitor as well for their focus pulling. But for me as a solo shooter, it works great. So I slide this on round about here with the bracket facing downwards and clamp it down around there. And then just tighten up the Allen key there so that that monitor doesn't move. Then I can slide the Nucleus Nano motor on here. Now, depending on the lens that I'm using, I may need to get some extensions like this Sigma 35mm, for example. The bars are just a little bit too low. The motor is just a little bit too short and the height of it can't be adjusted. So I'm gonna need to custom order some longer gears, I think, that can reach further out so that this thing can reach it. Typically I'd be shooting on the lens that you're seeing now, which is the Sigma 14-24, because it's a brilliant wide angle lens, and with the crop factor, of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, it's just a really nice all-around lens. It's not quite the 3 primes in one that the 18 to 35 offers, but it is a very, very good wide-angle lens. And then finally, you just run your cables from your battery plate to the respective units, and you're good to go. And then one of the most important things you can have on a camera rig are some Velcro zip ties to tie all of your cables down so that nothing is hanging loose, risking being snagged. And there you go. With all of that assembled, you get the SWAN Rig. Let me know what you think. Is this something you might try and build for yourself or something similar? If you do want to use any of those parts, there are links in the description, and as I said, there are affiliate links which won't cost you anything extra, but it will support this channel to continue making this kind of content. Feel free to give me a shout on Twitter or Instagram @dodmedia. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.